Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK, and today I am sharing with you how to crochet the really wanna wrap. Now this is one of my first designs that I released using the granny stitch, and it is worked in a ripple but with a bit of a difference. Unlike most granny ripples you'll see, this has an even number of peaks and troughs on each end of the pattern. So it means that if you're going to add some tassels like I have here, you're going to have an even number of tassels on each end. Now the materials that you're going to need to make your very own really wanna wrap is roughly 1,000 meters of worsted weight, size 4 or Aran weight yarn. Now originally I made this pattern up in Sirdar Jewel Spun, which is a lightweight Aran, but today I'm going to use this Premier Basics mosaic yarn. I love the way these colours look. They're bright, but they're not overly bright, and better than anything that I've seen before, it tells you how to get the yarn out. If, like me, you do love a centre pull ball, these skeins are designed to help you have an easy start to your project. So it has a nice easy start, and there is my centre pull ready to go. So as I said, you're going to need about 1,000 meters. So I do have quite a few of these. I have 6 just in case. It always does. This is a good ball because it does remind you to buy enough yarn of the same dye lot to complete your project. You may have noticed that this video is marked as sponsored content. That's because this yarn was kindly gifted to me by Premier, and I selected to order just one extra skein just in case because of this exact reason. I have got an extra couple of 100 yards of material just in case, because I want to make some tassels, but I managed to make them out of the 1,000 meters before, and hopefully I'll be able to this time as well. On top of your yarn, of course, you're going to need a crochet hook, and this pattern we're going to be using a 5.5 millimeter. Now, most worsted weight yarns or size 4 yarns are going to recommend a 5 millimeter hook. This one does actually recommend a 5.5. So if you are finding that you've got a lighter weight worsted, stick with the 5.5 because it'll give you a bit more movement in your wrap. So gather all of your materials and let's get started. Of course, don't forget, make sure you have hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my crochet patterns or tutorials again. Right, let's get started. So we're going to start by making a chain of 62. So we yarn over the hook, bringing our hook through the loop 62 times. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we're going to start by working into our 5th chain from hook. Remember, this loop doesn't count. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Just going to pop my nail there so I know where I'm inserting my hook, and we're going to start by working 1 US double crochet into that 5th chain from hook. I'm going to make a little bit of a recommendation here. Once we've found that 5th loop, we're going to turn our chain upside down. We're going to work into the back bumps of our chain. So if you've never counted the back bumps before, you can see that you've got, so there's a back bump, there's a back bump, there's a back bump. So there's number 1, it's just underneath the start of your yarn here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's number 5. So we're going to yarn over the hook and insert our hook underneath that back bump. We're going to yarn over, bring our loop up. Before we yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to work a further 2 double crochets into that same chain. So we yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over to bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we're going to work our 3rd and final double crochet into that same chain again. So we yarn over, insert, yarn over to bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So what we've done is we've created our first granny stitch. The chains that we've skipped count as 1 double crochet and a chain 1. We're then going to skip the next 2 chains. So there's 1 and there's 2 and there's number 3. I'm working into my back bumps. If you're finding it a struggle, you can still flip it over to see your chains, and there's our back bump. So we've got chain 1, chain 2, there's chain 3, and we're going into that back bump, and we're going to work a further 3 double crochets, working another granny stitch. So we yarn over, insert our hook under that back bump and work 1 double crochet, working back into that same back bump for our second double crochet, and again into the same one again, working our third. We're going to repeat that again by skipping the next 2 chains, working 3 double crochets into that next back bump after that. So we skip 1, 2, working into the next one, yarning over, ready to work 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. We're then going to work our first peak. So we skip the next 2 chains, and into this next chain we're going to work our 3 double crochets into that back bump. So that's 1, 2, and 3. We're then going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and we're working back into that same chain again, working a further 3 double crochets. So we yarn over, insert our hook again back into that same chain to work a further 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and again back into that same chain with our third. And already we have the start of our granny chevron. We're then going to continue, so we skip 2 chains, and then still sticking to working into our back bumps, we work 3 double crochets into that next chain. That's 1, 2, and 3. We're going to repeat that, so we skip 1, 2, and then we're working a further, oops, forgot to yarn over, 3 double crochets into the back bump again, 1, 2, and 3. I'll pop it down. You can see we've got a nice big peak right at the top there. Time we're going to skip 2 and work 3 double crochets into that next one. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And this time we're going to create our trough, so the bottom bit of our peak, effectively by skipping 5 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to work into this 6th one, working 3 double crochets. So we're skipping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, working 3 double crochets into the next. So that's 1, 2, 3. So we're going to repeat skipping 2 and working 3 double crochets twice. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Skip 2, working a further 3 double crochets into the next. So 1, oops, 2, and 3. And once we've done those next 2, we're going to be ready to work our peak again. So we're going to skip 2 chains, and then into that next chain we're going to work 3 double crochets, a chain 3, and a further 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. We then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then working into that same chain again, we're working a further 3 double crochets. That's 1, 2 and 3. We're going to skip 2 chains and work 3 double crochets 3 times. So that's 1, 2, you hear my dog snoring already, 3. Oh, we're going to skip the next 2 again to work a further 3 double crochet or a granny stitch. 1, 2 and 3, and again skip 2, 3 double crochets into the next. 1, 2 and 3. It doesn't look like much right now, but I promise it really will become more obvious as we move through how much you'll... Oh, that looks quite good. We've got an M. What more could we ask for? You should start to see the pattern forming. You have 3 granny blocks between your peaks and your troughs. So there's our peak. So 1, 2, 3. This time we're going to skip 5 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Ready to work 3 double crochets into the next. So that's 1, 2, 3. Skip 2 and work a further 3 double crochets into the next. So that's 1, 2 and 3. Skip 2 and again 3 double crochets into the next. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 chains remaining. We're going to skip those last 2 chains, and in this final one we're going to work 3 double crochets, a chain 1 and a further double crochet. So that's 1, 2 and 3, just as normal. We then make a chain of 1 and work a further double crochet into that same last chain. Pop that down without too many twists. So at the end of row 1 you should have 1, 2, 3 peaks, 1, 2, 3 troughs. More importantly, you should have 20 3 double crochet clusters, and you've got 1 double crochet at the end of each row. Going into row 2, we're going to make a chain of 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. That does count as our double crochet and our chain 1. We're going to work into this chain 1 space that we created at the end of the last row, working 3 double crochets. That's 1, 2 and 3. We're going to skip across, ready to work into the next 3 double crochet in between the next 2 clusters. We work 3 double crochets into there. So that's 1, 2 and 3. Do the same again into each of the next 2 spaces between. That's 1, 2 and 3. Do the same again. We have 1, 2 and 3. Now this has brought us up to our chain 5 space. We're going to skip this one entirely and skip over this space, ready to work our next 3 double crochet cluster into the next space there. So skip that one, and we're heading straight all the way over here to our next space, and we're working 3 double crochet clusters again. that's 1, 2 and 3. We're going to work all the way up to our peak, so we're going to work the same in the next 2 spaces, working 3 double crochet clusters. So that's 1, 2 and 3, and the same again. So 1, 2 and 3. So we've reached our peak where we have these 2 clusters into the same stitch, and we're going to repeat that again, working another peak. So we're going to work 3 double crochet clusters, a chain 3 and a further 3 double crochets, all into this same space. So that's my 3 double crochets, make a chain of 3, followed by a further 3 double crochets into that same space. So we're working that peak on top of the peak. And you can see that now that we've skipped that chain 5 space, it's making these peaks and troughs even more apparent. So we're going to continue down to that next chain 5 space, working 3 double crochet clusters into each space across. That's 1, 2 and 3. I'm going to do it into the next 2 spaces as well. So 1, 2 and 3, and again, so 3 times. So 1, 2 and 3. We're going to skip that chain 5 space, skipping right over to this one over here. So we're yarning over, inserting into that next space, skipping that chain 5 space completely, working a further 3 double crochets. So that's 3. We're going to work into the next 2, ready to meet our peak, where we're going to repeat the peak, or it looks like a corner, doesn't it really? So that's 2 and 3. Going to repeat that again, working 3 double crochets into the next. So 1, 2 and 3. We're back to our peak again. So into our peak we work 3 double crochets, a chain 3 and a further 3 double crochets, all into that same space. So chain 3 after your 3 double crochets, and work a further 3 double crochets into that same space. That's 1, 2 and 3. Once we've worked that next peak, we've just got 1 section left to work. We're going to work 3 double crochets into each of the next spaces, and then just 1 single double crochet into that last space. So in the next 3 spaces we work 3 double crochets. That's 3, and then another 3 into the next one, and into that third and final big space we're going to do those 3 double crochets again. And then when we reach this final space here, we're just going to work 1 double crochet into that final space. At the end of row 2, we're going to have the same count as we had before. So we've got 1 double crochet at the end of, and the beginning of this row, and we should still have 23 double crochet clusters. You should still have 3 peaks and 3 troughs. Going into row 3, we're going to chain 4, which again counts as our double crochet and our chain 1. We skip this space underneath our chain, and we're going to head over to that space in between the first 2 clusters. So we're going to skip this first space underneath our chain 4. We're going to work 3 double crochets into those first 3 spaces, ready to reach our peak. So yarn over, skip that first space, working in between the first 2 clusters, working 3 double crochets, and then work 3 double crochets into the next 2 spaces. So we've skipped that first space, 1, 2, 3. We're up to our peak here where we're going to work 3 double crochets, followed by our chain of 3 and a further 3 double crochets into that same space. It's really important that you remember to work it. It's a bit like a corner. It's kind of essential to our pattern. We're then going to work 3 double crochets into each of the next 3 spaces, and that brings us to our trough. So we skip that next space, ready to work back up to our next peak. So we're skipping and working 3 double crochets into each of the next 3 spaces. So we skip that one and start in the next space, working 3 double crochets, and we're working 3 double crochets into this one and the next 2 spaces, and that will bring us back to our peak. Once we're at our peak, we're repeating as always. We're working 3 double crochets into the peak, followed by a chain 3. So we do our chain of 3 and we work back into that same space again, working 3 double crochets. That brings us back down the side again, and you can already see where your trough is. It gets so much easier once you've established the pattern. So we're going to work 3 double crochets into each of the next 3 spaces, ready to skip that big one there. We're then going to skip our trough. That brings us our next 3 spaces to work into, and then we're at the end of row 3 already. So we're skipping where that chain space was at the bottom, and we're skipping all the way over to the next, working our 3 double crochets into those next 3 spaces. And our final space. Now once again, into this final space, we need to work 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3. We're going to chain 1 and work a further double crochet into that same space, and that brings us to the end of row 3. Now just like before, we should still have 23 double crochet clusters, and we should have 1 double crochet at each end. Now already you can see when you come back, we're going to work into that last space, and the easiest way to remember this pattern is very simply at the top of this peak at the end of row 3, we're going to be working our cluster, and at the end where we're at the bottom, we just work that single double crochet. Now believe it or not, that is all you need to work the whole pattern. All we're going to do is repeat row 2 and 3 for a total of 90 rows, and your pattern is going to grow very, very quickly. I hope that you're loving these colours so far, because I certainly am loving the way that they are turning out. So keep going, repeat rows 2 and 3 until you have a total of 90 rows. And then I'll be back with you to finish off this project, add our tassels, including some funky little beads, so that we can wear this feeling proud of ourselves for completing it. So you just continue to repeat rows 2 and 3 for a total of 90 rows, and I'll see you in a moment or 2 to finish off our project. So welcome back. I have finally finished my 90 rows. Had to place a marker because I kept losing track. And we are going to head straight into row 91. I've already done my turning chain, so let me just pull that back out. Now, of course, you can make this as long or as short as you would like. If you're wearing it as a super scarf, longer is most definitely better. If, like me, you're a little bit on the larger size, you may want to add maybe an extra 10 rows just to give you an extra more width when you're wrapping it around your shoulders as well. I have finished this shawl with a total row count of 90 as per the pattern, and I'm going to go straight into row 91, and this is where we're going to be adding a row of single crochets to edge this end, and then we're going to fasten off and do the same on the other end. So we just start with a turning chain of 1. and we're going to work 1 single crochet into the same stitch as our chain 1, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across up to the first peak. So work 1 single crochet into each stitch across up to your first chain space, and I will meet you there. Just working my final single crochet up to our chain 3 space, and in our chain 3 spaces we're going to work 3 single crochets. That's 1, 2 and 3. We're then going to continue to work all the way down to our next chain 3 space, just placing 1 single crochet into each stitch across to the trough, or the lower part, the non-peaky bit, should we say. Then once we've reached our trough, we are simply continuing to work into the stitches across. It looks like we need to work into a space there, but if we were to do that, it would distort the peak in our project. So you can see that at the moment our peak is nice and peaky, and we don't want our trough to expand out. So we're going to repeat this all the way across, working 1 single crochet into each stitch and 3 single crochets into each of the chain 3 spaces. Remember that when you get to that trough, the lower part of the opposite parts of the peak, you don't need to work into that lower part itself, just work into those 2 stitches and then continue as normal. In our chain 3 spaces, we are working 3 single crochets. Repeat that across, and I'll meet you at the end of row 91. We need to make sure we don't forget to work into that last chain space at the end of this row before working into the top of our 3rd chain of our turning chain from the previous row. So we're looking for that 3rd chain. My stitch is covering that up now. So we're just going to work into that 3rd chain to end our row. I'm going to fasten off. Now we need the other end of our shawl to rework row 91 and repeat it on our beginning chain. So if you've still got your original starting tail, this is where we're going to rejoin. So I'm going to insert my hook where my slip knot was at the end of our beginning chain. I'm going to place my yarn over the hook with the tail at the back and just bring that through to rejoin, and then we're ready to make our chain of 1. I would recommend that you weave these ends in as we go, just for a bit of ease when it comes to fastening off. So we're going to start by working 1 single crochet into the same as our chain 1. And in this space between our 3 double crochet clusters, we're going to be working 2 single crochets. So that's 1 and 2. We're then going to work 1 single crochet into the bottom of the next 3 double crochet cluster. We're going to repeat this all the way across to what was our base, which is actually the peak at the bottom of our shawl. So we're working 2 single crochets into the space between the 3 double crochet clusters, and then we're working 1 single crochet into the bottom of our chain 3 cluster. So 2 into the spaces and then 1 into the bottom of our cluster. It's going to help match the edging on both sides of our project. Way back when we started this project, we skipped 5 to create the peak. It was a trough at the beginning of our project. So in this occasion, we're going to place 5 single crochets into this chain 5 space. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's then going to allow the edges of our project. You can see that it creates a lovely peak for our project. Once you've worked those 5 single crochets, we're then going to work into the bottom of the next 3 double crochet cluster, working 1 single crochet. We work 2 in between those 3 double crochet clusters, and then we're going to continue down till we reach this point here. So we're working a single crochet into the bottom, 2 single crochets into the next space, 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets in between, and then we reach what would be our trough. So instead of working in between this space here, we're going to skip across and work 2 single crochets directly into that next space. As you can see, that means that when we're working 5 single crochets into that chain 5 space and coming down and skipping that space between the clusters there, it gives us the same shape as the top of our other edge of our pattern. So we're going to continue to repeat this all the way across, working 1 single crochet, working 1 single crochet into the bottom of our clusters, 2 single crochets into the space in between. When you reach your chain 5, we're going to work 5 single crochets, working back down, working 1, 2, 1, 2, all the way to this next space where it has those 2 clusters in, and we're skipping that space. So we're going to work 2 single crochets here, skip the space, 2 single crochets here. We're going to repeat that all the way up to our final space here, and that's where I'm going to meet you. So once we've worked all the way across to our final cluster space, we are going to work 2 single crochets into that final space, and that would just create that final peak for us. We can then fasten off and we can add on either a full fringe or you can add tassels into your peaks. As you can see in the photo here, I placed beautiful beaded tassels. You'll find in the description box below and in the top right hand corner my video tutorial to create tassels, and if you need any help with those, go and check out those videos. And if you would like to add a fringe, you can simply work a fringing into each of the stitches across. I'm going to go ahead and weave in my ends, and I'm going to block it before I add my tassels. I think it would really benefit from a very light stretch and a light steam, just to make those peaks and troughs look absolutely beautiful. Thank you as always for joining me for this tutorial. I will see you in the next video.